Besties, I need to tell you something. I need to sit down because this is quite the take. All right? I need you to hold my hand and listen to me. Okay? Are you ready? Just because a plant is easy doesn't mean it's beginner friendly. Now I need you to repeat after me. Just because a plant, keep holding my hand, just because a plant is easy doesn't mean it's beginner friendly. Okay? I feel this needs to be said because there are certain plants that we readily recommend. You go all over the internet, you Google easiest plants for beginners, you watch pretty much every video there is, and you see these plants being heavily recommended for beginners. But we sometimes forget to think the way a typical beginner would. We also fail to consider certain characteristics of these plants that we recommend that, yes, even though they are easy, these characteristics may prove daunting for beginners. I have the famous notepad here. Some of you who have watched several of my videos know that when this notepad is out, the plant industry is about to be revolutionized. When this notepad is out, tables are about to be shaken to pieces. So I have compiled a list of some of the most commonly recommended plants for beginners. I'm going to explain to you why these plants may not be as beginner friendly as they are professed to be, and also provide better alternatives. So we're not just debunking, but we're providing solutions. Do you get what I mean? So babes, sit down. This is going to be an interesting video. I can guarantee you that. And this is going to change your perspective of what really it quantifies to be a beginner-friendly plant. Now let's proceed. The first plant on this list is the ZZ plant. I still maintain till this day that although this is an easy plant, it is not beginner friendly and we should not recommend it to beginners for two reasons. Okay? For two reasons. Listen carefully. The first reason is that this plant is extremely unforgiving of overwatering. Trust me, as somebody who has unalived several of them, they will not tolerate overwatering at the slightest bit. They absolutely love to stay in perpetually drought-like conditions. Now, the reality of the matter is for every beginner, in my experience, no matter how you tell them, no matter how you teach them, no matter how many video tutorials they watch on watering plants, they would always overwater their first couple of plants. Always. That's pretty much how we learnt, we, the gurus in this industry. That's pretty much how we learnt to then water plants properly, from overwatering them. So it doesn't make sense to recommend a plant that is so unforgiving of overwatering. It makes more sense to recommend a plant that is more forgiving of overwatering, especially if it happens once or twice. It can still tell you, babes, oh, you're overwatering me. Tone it down a notch. The ZZ will absolutely not do that. It will just begin to decline, and oftentimes it's a downward slope from there. Now, that's just one reason. Another reason is that the ZZ plant is a slow growing plant, babes, even in the best of conditions. Even when you give it optimum light, you fertilize it often, it's creating the perfect soil, it will at the very most give you one leaf a month. You're lucky to have 2 or 3 coming out at the same time if you have multiple plants in that same pot. Now, all of this can prove to be quite disappointing for a beginner plant parent, because I don't know about you, but when I first got into plants, what really made me even more of a plant, crazy plant person was just seeing new growth on my plants. And I was lucky to get plants that grew fast. There's just this excitement, there's just this joy that comes with seeing your plant bringing out new growth on the regular, and it really makes you feel like you're doing something right, and it really makes you want to even get more plants. So if we want to keep people hooked in our community, In our industry, we need to introduce to them a plant that, will reward them more readily with growth. So, what alternative should we give instead of a ZZ plant? Let me check my notes, hang on, because as a millennial, I struggle with short term memory. Yeah. A great replacement for the ZZ plant is the peace lily, your spatophyllum. I'm going to tell you why. The first reason is because this is the plant that is more forgiving of overwatering. This plant is really a thirsty plant. One of the reasons why I don't like it because I can't even keep up with how often it likes water. And it's less likely to throw a tantrum when it is, overwatered. Another awesome thing about the peace lily is that it will very, very dramatically let you know that it's thirsty. So, as a beginner, yes, it might be a shocking sight at first, but it then teaches you how to water your plants. When you begin to see the leaves look wilted, okay, this my plant is thirsty. You can be rest assured that in the right conditions, you might even be getting as much as 2 leaves per week. So I hope you're with me. I hope you're seeing, do you see what I see? Do you see what I see? If you agree so far with this video, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe, share with your homeboys and share with your homegirls, all of that good stuff. Let's proceed to the next one. Next one is going to leave the girlies clutching their pearls, but it does have to be said. Monstera deliciosa. She's an icon, she's a legend, and she will always be the moment. But she's not beginner friendly if we're being real. Oftentimes, when people fantasize about owning a Monstera deliciosa, especially beginners, they can see it and be like, oh my god, this is such a statement plant that will look so beautiful in my home. This is oftentimes the picture they fantasize about, your typical Instagram, Pinterest friendly picture. Eventually, they will realize that this is the reality of owning this plant if they don't know that it needs to be staked. And you also need to provide it with a moss pole. Because your Monstera, a lot of beginners do not realize it, but it is a vining plant. So when you buy it from your big box stores, your Lowe's, in your American supermarkets, what these growers do in order to make the plant look more enticing is that they will actually add a combination of different vines of the plant in the pot. So your Monstera looks so lush. It gives the vibe that you want it to give. But each vine will eventually need a pole. It will need to be trellised. It will need something to latch onto as it grows. If not, you're going to end up with a very frightening looking Monstera, a very unruly Monstera. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me as a beginner, I used to find trellises, moss poles really, really complicated and really intimidating at first. I didn't just want to have to deal with it. I didn't. I found it really scary. And I wager that a lot of beginners will also find the idea of moss poles high maintenance and whatnot. So I would say leave the Monstera for now until you have a bit more experience, growing plants up a pole, pruning plants, latching them, moss poles, all of that. And there is no better plant that will teach you how to do this than, hold on, let me go get her, hold on, than a good old-fashioned trailing pothos. Yes, babes, we need to recommend this trailing pothos more often in place of your Monstera deliciosa. Because unlike the Monstera deliciosa, this is a vine, but it will readily trail downwards without looking like a frightening mess. And the awesome thing about your pothos, especially if it's the greener varieties, I will link towards the likes of the golden pothos, the global green pothos, the jade pothos. I will link towards the likes of that. If it's the more green varieties, you can very readily prune them. This plant will teach you all you need to know about pruning, all you need to know about cutting plants, all you need to know about propagating plants, because this is a plant that propagates very readily and grows really fast. So it will teach you all you need to know about all that stuff. And then when you're not armed with that knowledge, you can then tackle the Monstera deliciosa or any climbing plant for that matter. In fact, I will go as far as not recommending plants that need a moss pole, plants that you need to put them on a trellis as they grow to beginners, because it can seem a bit like intimidating. So instead of your Monstera deliciosa, go for this training process. Okay? So the next one is gonna have to be Dieffenbachias.
Period.
Dieffenbachias. Because Dieffenbachias always end up looking like this.
Jesus is Lord.
Always, for the most part, most of them, the only Dieffenbachia that hasn't done that for me is my Dieffenbachia Big Ben Variegated out there, which this is a great opportunity for me to show off this plant because she's an icon. She's, oh my goodness. Jesus! Hang on. Just take a look at this baby. Oh my god, I'm sorry I'm digressing, but I just always love to show off this plant at any given opportunity. Back to the video. I got carried away. Anyways, yes. But most Dieffenbachias, in my experience, will end up having that bare, leggy truck that I personally find really like unappealing. Now, this is the part where it can be a bit of a heartache for beginners because what the Dieffenbachia does is that it loses a lot of leaves as it matures. All those bottom leaves will just begin to fall off because this plant seems to be hell-bent as it matures to have that bare rump, that bare frightening looking stem. Some people have said this is how this plant actually like propagates itself in the wild. Like in the wild, it will fall and grow on the ground, and that bare exposed trunk will then root into the soil and it will just literally begin to like crawl. That's what some people say. In my experience, I've noticed that when this plant becomes root bound, it will just start dropping all those bottom leaves. It doesn't like to be root bound. And this is a plant that gets root bound really fast in most cases. I think the reason why my Big Ben variegata hasn't, done all of that is because this is a plant that grows much slower due to the high variegation than other Dieffenbachia. So it's not one that readily root bounds. So whatever the case may be, whether it is how it grows by nature in the wild or whether it is, as a result of being root bound, all of this can be very confusing for a beginner. They can literally be like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? My Dieffenbachia is losing all these lower leaves. What is happening? It can send them on this spiral downhill, mental agitation, all of that, which is why no, even though it's an easy plant, I would say no, do not get it as a beginner until you have a better understanding about how some plants just prefer to grow, So if you love a Dieffenbachia, you love the big showy leaves, I have a good replacement for you. Hang on, I just love to show this one off at the slightest opportunity. Oh, get yourself one of these, babes. An Aglaonema. An Aglaonema of any variety will do. It doesn't have to be this specific one. Now, a lot of Aglaonemas look so similar to Dieffenbachia. A lot of people even mistake them for a Dieffenbachia. But you're going to get a plant that stays bushy, stays compact, doesn't, do all of that dropping of leaves like the Dieffenbachia does. It's just as low light tolerant as the Dieffenbachia, most of them anyways, and it's even more drought tolerant than the Dieffenbachia. So I would always advocate for Aglaonemas on this page. Yeah. Okay, so this next one has a lot of Instagram beginner plant girlies on a chokehold. It's so Instagrammable. It's so like, social media palatable that when you see this on the likes of Instagram or the likes of TikTok, you're like, I want this plant. I want this plant. And I can't blame you because it's gorgeous. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the bird of paradise. Yes, that plant. And this is typically the image and the visuals they typically see when they think about a bird of paradise. They think, oh my God, wow, beautiful. I need this plant. Well, the reality of the matter is, in most cases, especially for beginners who haven't mastered lighting yet and all of that, this is how the plant ends up looking like. A hot, leggy mess. Because your bed of paradise is a plant that needs lots of light. It needs lots of light, especially lots of overhead light. It needs highlight. And as a beginner, it's still gonna take you a few practices to figure out good lighting, or to even figure out that you need a grow light, or to figure out what type of grow light you need and what type of grow light will work best. These are things that you just learn on experience. So you want a plant that is gonna be more tolerant of your like inexperiences. Now, the thing about this bird of paradise is that once it becomes leggy and unruly due to not getting enough light, it begins to look like an unpleasant sight. And the only way to literally rectify it is to cut the leaf. It's not one of those plants that you know, okay, you cut it and then it branches out. No, no. You literally have to cut those unruly, leggy, highlight deprived leaves and just allow it patiently grow out from the middle again in better light conditions. So it's beautiful, but it is not beginner friendly. Wait until you have more experience before you buy this plant. Now, instead of getting that, I have a good alternative for you that I hope you like. The Ficus altissima. What do you think? Are you feeling it? Are you feeling the suggestion? I'll tell you why this is a good alternative. Because this is a plant that can get big. It can give you that statement effect you want in your living room, in your decor. But this, in my opinion, is like the ficus that is like the most, low to medium light tolerant. I typically never recommend ficuses to be grown indoors. I'm very particular about, they're outdoor plants. They're literally a tree. But with this, I will make an exception. In fact, I'll even place this over the rubber plant, right? And when it does get leggy, it can still add to the overall beauty of the plant. Like it can just look like a tree that has like a bare stump, which it's still architectural when it gets leggy. Also, this is a plant that branches out on its own readily. Like it just branches out. Like the one I have growing, I've hardly ever pruned it. It just branched out on its own regularly. So in the right conditions, especially if you have this plant like underneath a grow light or in bright light, it's just going to get fuller and will give you that, oh my God, I'm growing a tree in my house effect. So yeah, let's recommend the Ficus audrey more regularly than we do the Bed of Paradise. Don't fall for the Bed of Paradise Instagram, marketing trap. No. This next one has to be said, and it's going to leave everyone in the industry shooked because till this day, like if you literally Googled the easiest plants for beginners, this is going to be the top one. But as somebody who grows a lot of them and somebody who considers themselves an aficionado, and as somebody who this plant is native to their home country, I feel like I can categorically debunk it. The plant is the snake plant.
What?
The snake plant. And why I say this is not a beginner friendly plant is because there's just so much misinformation about this plant on the internet. There's so much misinformation about how to care for this plant on the internet that as a beginner, you're bound to come across all this misinformation. You are bound to come across all this misinformation, and then you're going to beat yourself in the head wondering why your snake plant isn't doing well because you are following all the information you've been given on the internet. One, the biggest misinformation that people have about this plant is that it is a low light plant. Now, babes, there's a huge distinction between low light and low light tolerant. Okay? Snake plants are not low light plants. They just tolerate it a lot more. And by tolerate, I mean they very, very, very slowly unalive. Yes, if you put a snake plant in a low light place, that plant is very, very slowly beginning to unalive. So you might wake up like literally 6 months later and your snake plant just falls apart. These guys need and love highlights. They flourish. A lot of them can take intense, crazy sun. They're not native to areas like literally they're native to my country, Nigeria. And have you seen the sun in this country? Yeah, so yeah. They are used as landscaping plants. They don't No one grows them in shade here, basically. Yeah, so take that into consideration. Also, a lot of people, and I was for a very long time, a lot of people are under the impression that snake plants are drought tolerant. Babes, I have quickly learned that they may be drought tolerant, but they don't want to be left to stay dry for too long. No, 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 no. In fact, that is how I lost virtually 90% of the snake plants that I grow indoors. I just figured, okay, these guys can handle 2 or 3 months without watering. They'll be fine. No, absolutely not. The moment a snake plant becomes bone dry and you leave it to stay dry for a month, trust me, when you come to water that plant, it will just entirely rot and fall apart. And that's because the roots of the snake plant are quite susceptible to prolonged periods of drought and underwatering. They don't like to be left to stay dry for too long. Okay. So if you're a beginner getting them for all those reasons, oh, they're low light tolerant, oh, okay, they are, drought tolerant, I ain't got time to be watering plants. No, 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 no. I don't think they're the best plant for that. But let me tell you what plant, in my opinion, possesses all those factors. It is really light adaptable. It can take intense sun, but also grow in low light. And it is extremely drought tolerant. And that plant is the ponytail palm. We don't talk about this plant enough. We don't recommend this plant enough. I don't see it making the list on a beginner-friendly plant. No, if you're the type of beginner that wants a plant that, that doesn't want you to water it all the time, get yourself a ponytail palm. This is a very drought tolerant plant. It can literally, there was one time when I was growing this plant and I dumped it somewhere in my living room. I literally went 3 months without watering it. 3 months. And it was in a terracotta pot. So, oh my goodness gracious, please. This is a better alternative than the snake plant. Get yourself a ponytail palm if you're a beginner. Then get the snake plant when you've gotten a bit more experience. That's my take on that. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments. Now, this next one needs to be said. I feel like people that love this plant a lot, they're always trying to get people to convert to this plant. They're like always preaching this plant. Oh yes, take this plant. It's good. If you go. No. But please. It's an entire genus of this plant. And some of you already know at this point. I mentioned this plant in a lot of my videos because I do love to debunk this plant. I feel like it's a bit like overhyped. Get what I mean? It's great, but it's not as great as the girlies say she is. And it's also not beginner friendly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Hoyas. Hoyas. Please. Hoyas are not beginner friendly. Yes, some are easy. But like I said in the beginning of this video, just because a plant is easy doesn't mean it's beginner friendly. Hoyas are not beginner friendly for 2 reasons. One, they are mealybug magnets. You would always have mealybugs in your Hoyas, like regardless of what Hoya that is, you will eventually always see mealybugs on it. And I don't know about you, but as a beginner, there was nothing as frightening as mealybugs. So like when I saw people that had mealybug infestations, I used to be like, oh my God, please, I hope I never encounter it. Oh, trust me, as a beginner, the first time you see a mealybug, you're gonna be like overwhelmed. You're gonna be running helter skelter. So it doesn't make sense to recommend a plant that is a mealybug magnet. No, just no. Why would you do that to a beginner? What, you want to give them high blood pressure? No. Another thing is that Hoyas are not plants that you can just grow in any soil. You can't grow them in any mix. You can't just get your coco Hoya and then your perlite. You can't, because these guys have, for the most part, have really delicate roots that are epiphytes. So you can quickly lose them to overwatering and underwatering. So you need to be like versed to a certain extent in how to prepare a chunky, potting mix, or use a substrate that is fast draining. And as a beginner, these things are really complicated for you. Like at first, you don't have the experience, you don't have the know-how, and you don't want a plant that would make you want to start mixing a batch of thought. No, you want a plant that is tolerant to a certain extent of the type of medium it grows in. And as you gain more experience, you can then play around with your little substrates, your leca, your perlite, all of that stuff. Play around with it and see, okay, this is what works for me, this is what works for my plant. So like Hoya heads, Hoya people, let's stop trying to recommend them to every Tom and Dick and Harry. Can we not do that? They are not beginner friendly. Yeah. Let me give you a great alternative. So this one is going to look like this one is going to, they look like polar. They are certainly polar opposites, but I couldn't make this video without including this plant. Like I don't see people talk about this plant enough, and I'm like, this is like the ultimate beginner friendly plant in the world. So I mean, hang on. Ladies and gentlemen, your cast iron plant. Your cast iron plant. I know she looks really meh. I know she doesn't look like the most attractive plant. But as the name implies, this plant is as tough as a cast iron skillet. This plant is virtually impossible to unalive. That's why it's called a cast iron plant. It may not look the prettiest, it may not look as gorgeous as your typical Hoyas, but if you're a beginner, I will always recommend this plant. It will teach you a lot about neglect. It will teach you that just because a plant can handle neglect and is okay with neglect doesn't mean it is thriving. You're going to have to take care of this plant, because even though this plant is indestructible and can handle extreme neglect, it won't grow. It just won't grow. If you then want it to grow, you're going to have to start taking care of it. It can handle neglect. It won't unalive on you. It won't croak on you. But once you take care of sis, she begins to grow. And I always see people that they're like maybe discouraged because this plant looks basic. I would say pair it with a cute pot. Pair it with a cute, one of these cute pots, your thrifted pot, your vintage pots, like I've done here. And you're gonna have a plant that will stand out wherever it is placed. So yeah, this over a Hoya for beginners. But yeah. So, oh my God, babes, we have come to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really supports my channel. And let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with this list? Like, do you agree? I like to always reply each and every comment. So please drop a comment below and let's talk. Let's continue this conversation in the comments. But for now, goodbye.